The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, welcome everyone to, oh gosh, Teresa, you just told me the word, our extended meeting from last night on agenda item number 17 that we weren't able to complete last night. All council members, except for Council Member Gomez, are present, and we're going to start with a presentation from the applicant.
And I just want to let you know that I'll control Rachel, I'll control your presentation. You just tell me when to change the slides.
Terrific. Thank you very much, John. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Outstanding. Then let's take it away. Good evening, Mayor Harmon, council members. Thank you very, very much for all of your patience last night and for accommodating us again today. I'm Rachel Cabezdi, representing the San Luis Ranch team. As you know, we didn't have a formal presentation last night prepared, but given the questions that have come up, we do have a brief presentation that will hopefully give your council some useful information on why this tract map looks the way it does. The entitlements before you tonight are intended to facilitate the orderly development of uses currently allowed in the adopted specific plan. The specific plan amendment will allow San Luis Ranch to increase the total number of affordable units from the currently required 60, with 26 required on site, to a revised minimum of 64 units with a potential increase to 77 units, all managed by our amazing partners at People's Self-Help Housing. This will net the city between 4 and 17 bonus affordable units beyond those required by the specific plan, and between 38 and 51 extra units if we assume that in lieu fees would be paid. These units will directly contribute to the city's RHNA goals and be a significant benefit to our city's residents. The final number of these affordable units will be determined by funding sources available to People's Self-Help, but we should note that the site area and the residential dedicated parking spaces have been designed to accommodate 77 units. People's Self-Help Housing has constructed over 1,900 units in over 50 multifamily projects, stretching from San Miguel to Moore Park. They have an internal goal for 10% of all project units to be occupied by formerly unhoused individuals and families. And People's is the largest houser of homeless veterans in San Luis Obispo County. Additionally, as you know, People's Self-Help Housing offers residents a remarkable range of services, from job and financial literacy training to ESL, counseling, and after-school programs. Their facilities typically include on-site amenities, including community rooms and private social service offices. These use areas will actually be located on the first floor of the residential structure or structures facing the commercial uses, which will allow for that vertical mixed use look for the site. All right, so John, let's hop into the PowerPoint. You can go to the next slide if you will. Thank you very much.
This one right here?
That one's perfect, thanks. So briefly, we're just going to go over tonight a little bit of site history, some constraints on the site, as well as opportunities that the site allows. Next slide, please. When the council approved the specific plan in 2017, they did so with 4 major loose goals in mind: a diverse range of housing types, multimodality, agricultural preservation, and outdoor recreation opportunities. So that's kind of the umbrella big picture of what we were trying to accomplish jointly with the city through the San Luis Ranch specific plan area. Next slide, please. The San Luis Ranch project was developed during the land use and circulation element update, beginning in 2012, culminating in 2014. And since the adoption of the LUC, the project has been evaluated by numerous city and county review bodies. Next slide, please. The LUC provided specific direction for the San Luis Ranch specific plan area, including, you'll see at the bottom there highlighted, requirements for flood remediation, and Airport Land Use Commission conformance. Those are the two constraints that I'd like to highlight tonight. Next slide, please. So all of these next slides are coming out of our Airport Land Use Commission hearings, and that was a 3 to 4 year process. The adopted county airport land use plan maps, you see one here, identifies most of the San Luis Ranch site as lying within the S1B safety zone, which allows 1 residential unit per 5 acres of land. So let that sink in for a moment. You can see that this map actually, which the Airport Land Use Commission itself calls their crayon map, actually takes in everything up to and including the post office property. Next slide, please. So the ALUC acknowledged that their adopted map was actually inconsistent with the language of their adopted plan. And so they corrected map was prepared by Canon. You can see here that the S1B area takes in less of the site with this correction, this map correction, which is what allows for some additional residential density on the site. Next slide, please. This slide just gives you a very brief glimpse. This is one of many, many, many into how detailed the multi-year analysis with the Airport Land Use Commission was. I am not going to walk you through this site. It is this slide. It's extremely painful. It was painful the first time. And you don't, trust me, I hope you never need to know any of this information. Next slide, please. So the ALUC made unique findings in the case of San Luis Ranch to allow a specific number of residential units in the S1B zone. Those are you can see the single family and the townhome products. We'll call that southeast of that big black S1B line. With a condition that no additional units be requested within the S1B zone. Next slide, please. So how does that affect the commercial portion of the site? This bright red line and everything, we'll say east, kind of southeast of it, can accommodate absolutely no additional residential units, not one. Only lots 4, 10, and 11 could be considered for residential development. So you can see how that really limits our ability to do a vertical mixed use just by virtue of how residential is not allowed in the majority of the commercially zoned area. Next slide, please. Okay, additionally, the site was responsible for capturing stormwater from Cerro San Luis and the existing Madonna shopping plaza. So a lot of those drainage inlets and the infrastructure on the older Madonna shopping plaza is undersized. So it made improvements to Cerro San Luis channel up against the post office. We also put in underground storage detention systems, which satisfy the Regional Water Quality Control Board requirements to address those existing deficiencies in stormwater flows. So you can see that the underground storage, the detention facilities actually overlap with the strict no-build zone for the Airport Land Use Commission. Next slide, please. So moving on from constraints, let's move on to opportunities. The first one is residential clustering. So when we look at the site overall, as opposed to just the NC zoned siting, you can see that the proposed people self-help residential product is actually located directly adjacent to the NG23 and NG30 neighborhoods, as well as the open space trail system. So you can see that they're actually all tucked in together. And the next slide will actually look at the connectivity between those uses. Next slide, please. I apologize, this slide is a little bit cluttered, but the blue lines indicate paths of bicycle circulation. The green lines indicate pedestrian circulation. The orange lines represent pet walking circulation. So you can see that the People Self-Help residential site is deeply integrated into the multimodal circulation of the site, from the open space path along the San Luis Channel through the neighborhoods and to the Central Park, and then connecting into the fitness loop that runs all the way around the project. So there's a lot of opportunities for connectivity from this corner of the site. Next slide, please. So this is a schematic illustration showing how the multifamily residential and commercial structures might be designed to integrate really seamlessly. The structures, the 3-story structures on the right are the People's. And again, this is very, very schematic. None of these buildings have been designed yet, but this is one concept of how these could be integrated. The first floor, as I mentioned, of the People's structures would contain things like their community rooms and their offices, which will give that mixed use, vertical mixed use feel to this corner of the center. And then of course we'll integrate plazas and bike parking and the multimodality path system, all of those things. So this is one illustration of how this area right at the juncture of the residential and commercial could function. Next slide, please. And finally, this schematic illustrates how the commercial component can be designed with attractive pedestrian-centered plazas. This is clearly the direction that the team is taking. This, again, is only illustrative. This is one way it could look, but with a variety of skin treatments and lots of emphasis on pedestrian plazas and gathering places and bike accessible places. This is purely conceptual and it'll be fleshed out with the development plan. But again, this gives you a pretty good indication of what could happen here. Next slide, please. So our goal tonight is just to get approval of the specific plan amendment and the tentative tract map, primarily so that People Self-Help Housing can go forward and pursue funding opportunities while the San Luis Ranch team continues to develop plans for the commercial center. We do not want to hold up the critical work that People's wants to do. They have some very stringent timeframes for grant proposals and those sorts of things. So we want to cut them loose through this tract map so that they can go forward, get their funding in order, design their buildings. We want the maximum number of affordable units to be built on this site just as soon as possible. In order to facilitate that goal, actually, we do have one concern that we would request the council consider tonight. We'd like some clarification on condition 28, which requires each residential unit, including affordable units, to be separately metered and billed. That requirement for individual meters is actually quite burdensome for People Self-Help Housing because individual meters increase their cost and complicate their process to obtain funding. So we're hoping that language can be added to the second sentence to read, all for sale residential units are to be individually metered, or alternatively, a sentence could certainly be added clarifying for rent units don't have to be metered individually for this particular affordable development. This will allow People's Self-Help Housing to keep these affordable units actually affordable to low and very low income families. So with that, we've got John Fowler of People Self-Help Housing here, along with Walter Heiberg, of San Luis Ranch. I'm available. We're all available to answer any questions that you may have tonight. We really appreciate your extra time tonight and your thoughtful consideration. Thank you so much.
Is it all right if I go ahead and ask a couple questions? Or I don't know if staff wants to.
John, it sounded like we were gonna, are we going to
Is John
John?
gonna- Yeah, is John presenting or just available?
No, I think they're just available. Heidi.
Okay, sure, yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Or I don't know if staff wanted to respond to the condition about the meters.
Or if there's any other public comment.
Yeah. That'd be fine.
I don't, go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, my recommendation would be to see if there's any additional public comment, and then we can bring it back to the council, and staff and John can entertain any questions.
Great. Teresa?
I'm not seeing anyone typing their name in the questions box yet, but I think we should just give them maybe half a minute here real quick, just to, if there are any, but if there is anyone who wants to speak on this item, to type their name in the question box.
Okay.
Okay, does not look like it.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Andy, then?
Thank you so much, and thank you, Rachel, for the explanation. It does help to understand kind of the rest of the constraints of the site, of which, you know, we already knew there were a lot and there were even more. So so that was good to know, and I appreciate that. Are there limitations in terms of a second floor or office, so maybe not mixed use residential, but to kind of have a little bit more density, walking street kind of experience?
Well, let me start with an answer here that, Rachel, you can build on. One thing we didn't talk about last night, but it is in your pack and it's part of what you're considering for approval, is some language within the San Luis Ranch specific plan and the design guidelines, which wasn't there before, which really speaks to how you might guide a project. Now, it doesn't speak specifically to the question you're raising, but I do have a couple of slides that I could show you. You can go on with other questions, but it will be used, and it's in, I think, attachment H of your packet, where all the language from the design guidelines that are being considered are in there. And it talks about things that have to do with integration of commercial and residential from a design standpoint, functional standpoint. Doesn't talk about building heights, doesn't talk about that specifically, but there is guidance for the Planning Commission to consider a project when the development plan comes forward.
And while John's bringing that up, this is Rachel again. I can jump in and let you know that in addition to the residential limitations placed on the project by the Airport Land Use Commission, we also have a restriction of 175, they call it boots on the ground, person occupancy per acre on the commercial site. So that's a part of the reason that the commercial footprint overall has been squeezed, because we just, when we're calculating out various uses, we need to be very careful not to go north of 175 persons per acre maximum occupancy.
So this is John again. I don't know if everyone can see the screen I have up. And it's a lot to read, and I'm not going to read it all, but I have two different slides which are in the packet. But what we asked the applicants to come up with when they had proposed this was more language in the design guidelines that would get to these questions we knew that you and the Planning Commission, even ARC, would have. And they have to do with, for example, in D, the lower floors in the buildings should communicate through key elements and architectural details that have to do with scale. Item C here, again, there are design features that should be in there that encourage a sense of place with the people who live there and the people shopping there, for example. So there's a lot of design issues here. And on this slide, again, there's more that have to do with pedestrian circulation, outdoor space uses, bicycle circulation. Again, all of it having to do with integrating design and function and moving people around so they function in a way that's attractive and utilitarian. Doesn't talk to the issues of building heights, which are discussed elsewhere in the San Luis Trans-Pacific Plan, but there is some flexibility in there too. It's a question of the design they come forward with.
So John, following up on that, and that is where I was kind of pulling that language about the vertical and horizontal mixed use. It's a, it's a super helpful document there. Is the, especially when we are thinking about vertical mixed use, if is the track map being developed in such a way that we're limiting our ability to do that vertical mixed use? It doesn't seem to be laying out for that. So I'm getting like, okay, maybe residential, as much as I'd love to see residential on the second floor of that one building that's, outside of the airport use, and maybe that could happen, maybe it doesn't. But I guess I'm just not seeing where vertical mixed use is even on the table.
Well, I'll let Rachel speak to the specifics there, except for that I would say that the language you have in front of you doesn't necessarily preclude anything other than limitations on the amount of square footage and the number of units. It doesn't necessarily say how you do that. The constraints of the site are known, as Rachel said, having to do with the airport and flooding. But Rachel, you might want to speak to potential designs if that's even possible.
So at this point, we are, again, in very, very preliminary stages of design work on the commercial side of things. I can tell you that ARC and the Planning Commission have been very clear that they would like to see some multi-story elements within the commercial development. So we're looking at ways to appropriately incorporate those into an interesting design, again, that can get some of that vertical mixed use. Obviously, I think that the folks that are designing this will also tell you that with the changes we anticipate coming out of the pandemic, that we're not entirely sure at this moment what the market is going to look like. So for example, small office space on the second floor of first floor, small coffee shop type retail might be exactly what people are looking for when all of this dust settles. So I think the bottom line from our perspective is that this commercial portion, the commercial project, the development plan is a work in progress. We're going to need more information, more data points moving forward into 2021 in terms of what is marketable, what direction is retail going, what direction is office going. All of those things are going to come into play. And so that will all be addressed in the development plan. Again, we hope to bring that forward in the first half of 2021. Originally, we had that slated for closer to the end of this year, but of course that was pre-March. And the world of commercial is shifting. So I have every anticipation that the ARC and Planning Commission will do what they've done to date, which is really hold our feet to the fire in terms of getting the very best, most integrated, most PED-friendly, forward-thinking design possible out of whatever it is that we present. So again, they'll have all kinds of opportunities to see that. We're certainly hoping to work collaboratively with them on that. It's just at this point in time, People's Self-Help Housing has some pretty critical funding deadlines coming up. We do not want them to miss those funding window opportunities, waiting to see how the dust settles on the commercial side. So we understand all of the concerns. We think that we can do a multi-use, multi-level, really interesting, pedestrian-focused design here. It's just going to take a little bit of time to do that.
And just to add one more thing to that, what you folks on the council are considering is really, you've got a policy framework, both in the general plan and the specific plan. What this specific plan amendment includes, among other things, is clarifying this point about vertical mixed use. It wasn't explicit before. It will be explicit now in this item A. Horizontal and vertical mixed use is encouraged in an item D, where it also speaks to vertical mixed use. It's a policy framework that both ARC and Planning Commission can tee off of from their review, and that wasn't there before. So that's something to consider as well.
Thanks, that's helpful. All right, so then I think then I am feeling a lot more comfortable with, I think the last question that I have then is the on that site plan where there are kind of, and I'm not remembering the lot numbers, but 8, 9, and 10, and they're little, and if that needs to shift or glom together in order to have a bigger building that has kind of stacking or that type of thing, is that a big deal? Are we, by kind of having these little blob buildings, are we limiting ourselves, or can that still kind of come together either at the staff level, at the director's level, or through minor shifts? Is that making sense?
It does, and it comes up on virtually almost every subdivision. There's some shifting around between the tentative map and the final map. So lot combinations are possible. Lot line adjustments even after a final map is recorded are possible. And the limitation that I have after a tentative map is approved, I can't allow, or I won't recommend to the city council that the final map be approved if it has a smaller or larger number of lots.
Okay.
So lots can be consolidated and adjusted after the final map is recorded, but from the tentative map to the final map, you've got to keep the same number of lots in roughly the same configuration, but we have some flexibility there.
Okay, and there's obviously flexibility within each lot as well, as far as the location and adjacency, if they wanted to cluster one way and create space another way or something.
Right.
So Councilmember Pease, if I'm understanding your question correctly, one, if you're looking at this illustrative site plan, one opportunity might be to take lots 7 and 8 or lots 6 and 7, merge those, do a well-articulated 2-story building, that kind of thing. And that could be accommodated with the lots as proposed for the tentative map. It would just be either merged or a 0 lot line development.
Okay, great. I'm just thinking, elevators are expensive, and so little buildings don't usually want their own elevators, and could there be, some joining, things like that?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah.
I was going to say, so the other question is this thing about meters that you were just talking about at the beginning, John, or Rachel, somebody?
And maybe I'll ask a question about the meters. There's a certain pattern of when people know how much energy they're using, then they adjust their use accordingly, right? So from a energy efficiency perspective, metering is a positive, but in that case, it doesn't need to be a legal energy company kind of meter in my mind in order to get that benefit. So that would be kind of my goal, but I don't know where that condition came from at the staff level.
So I'm just bringing it up so we can read it in case there's something to talk about here. It's number 28 here on the left. Yeah, I can blow that up. And I can't speak to that. I mean, it's sort of a utilities question. So if we had anyone from utilities to speak to that, it might be useful.
So this seems to have the kind of the language that I'd be looking for. Privately owned sub-meters may be provided for residential apartments. That seems like the type of thing that would be useful. I mean, it could even be on an app.
So I see the privately owned sub-meters. What I think you're trying to talk to about is that sentence before that, all residential units are to be individually metered. Is that
Right.
what you're, somebody please?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you guys, we had an 8-hour meeting or whatever it was yesterday. Our brains are fried. Can somebody please help us figure out what we're supposed to be talking about here? I believe that Andy is right. The reason that we put in this individually metered thing is because people need feedback about their energy or water usage, and that's why you individually meter. It doesn't have to be any kind of technical meter. It just has to be a way so people know what their energy or water or whatever kind of meters we're talking about are. Okay.
Right. It almost needs a semicolon or as,
So who can you?
Yeah.
Michael, Derek, Rachel, John, somebody tell us.
We're trying
I'm
to.
getting a little frustrated here.
Rachel, you raised the issue, so can you clarify your issue with this one?
Let me see if we.
Thank
let me
you.
see if we. It's Shelley on. Do we have Shelley? You're here, I believe, on. I don't know if you can represent utilities.
I can give it a whirl. I think it'd be helpful, as John indicated, just for council's clarification, what the applicant's issue is with this requirement. My understanding is there's some flexibility in how to execute it. And so I think it would be good to understand what the roadblock is for them.
How about, I think I already got it. So all units are to be individually metered, period. For privately owned sub-meters may be provided in lieu of utility-owned meters for apartment buildings upon approval, right? That's what we're trying to differentiate, that the utility-owned meter is expensive, and really we're just trying to track use. Is that fair, Rachel?
I think that's exactly fair. Again, John Fowler is also on the line, so he may have some additional information about how sub-metering has worked on their other projects.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rachel and council. So this is John Fowler, and I can't answer that question. And that you're right, Councilmember Pease, it is an expensive issue. Obviously, it's affordable housing, so we're trying to keep the costs down. So, obviously the meter cost drives it up. But, this is a $25 million project for us. So the meter cost is not the end of the world for us. It does help us a little bit on our scoring in Sacramento because there's a ratio that they do between, funding that we get and the cost of the project. So the better that ratio is, the better your scoring, the more likely you'll get funded. So it's something that would be helpful to us, but certainly not, we're not going to fall on our sword about it. But we'd love to have the amendment, approved, but certainly it's not a big deal.
Thanks.
And I apologize that sorry to talk over you, Commissioner Pease.
Go ahead, Michael.
I apologize that I don't know in the moment if this is a code requirement or if this is something that we have some discretion over. And Derek, maybe you have the answer to that?
Yeah, I just had to take a moment to sift through our chapters. And so chapter 16.20.020 provides and requires that condominium units shall have a separate sub-meter, which will be the property and responsibility of the Condominium Owners Association. The condominium owners association agreement shall include provisions for the reading of the submeters and the proper division of city water sewer bill amongst condominium owners. Exception, non-residential airspace condos that have no potential for water use or water use fixtures within the airspace will not be required to have a submeter. And so it's, I guess, you know, looking at this, I don't know if we're providing conditions for a project where we already have law established by the city council.
So
Well,
Derek,
this
this is
isn't a
Rachel
common
again.
project. So I'm not sure that provision would apply. And so what I'm trying to do here is just suggest some catch-all language. So we have the flexibility where if this is a discretionary decision on the part of the utilities director, that we can provide that flexibility in the language. And if it's a code requirement, then, you know, really he won't have that discretion. But it's something that we can certainly circle back on, you know, following the meeting. And we heard from the housing developer that it isn't a make or break issue for the project, but having a little bit of flexibility in the language of the condition would be helpful in case we have that discretion.
And again, this is Rachel. Just to clarify, these are not condo units. These are going to be for rent affordable units. So I'm not sure about the applicability of that particular provision. But yes, any flexibility that we can give people's that meshes with code and any other overarching regulations would be very much appreciated.
Yeah, you're correct, Rachel. This section, and I'm searching real time here. I'm not that familiar with the submeter requirements. That's the only submeter requirements that I find in our municipal code, Mayor and Council. So I think that it is appropriate to put conditions in here since our municipal code is silent in this instance.
And I guess I would just, apologize that I didn't realize this was specific only to water. I assume that just by the other conditions there, this seems to be a water situation about submetering, in which case it's, I think energy use tends to be the more dramatic feedback on submeters. So from a policy intent direction, and then I'll leave it to staff, we'll leave it to staff to resolve. I think it's more about wanting tenants to be aware of their individual water use, energy use, but energy would be the more important. And I don't know the cost of those kind of little submeters that don't go back to utility departments. I think they're just little devices.
One thing we can say is, if the intent is to make this more cost effective, that your direction is clear, and we can go work with utilities to see if we can work within that direction within the code. And if we can, then we can change the language.
Councilmember Pease, this is John Feller again. So we have 53 locations, as you know, a lot on the Central Coast. We monitor water, sewer, trash, everything on every one of them on a monthly basis, just to make sure usage is appropriate, if there's any water leaks. So we have a whole internal tracking system that we do through our asset management department, if that helps at all. But again, this is not what we should worry about on this particular project. So if we can get some flexible language, that would be awesome. If not, because of code or whatever, it's not an issue.
Great, thanks. Hey, John, are you supposed to be retired?
Yes, my title now is President Emeritus, and this was a project that I wanted to shepherd all the way through before I did my swan song. So,
all right.
so they were gracious enough to say, yeah, you can actually be the point person on this still until the very end. So,
Okay.
I am going to retire though, Carolyn.
All right. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, Council, can I ask just for some clarification, is the language affording discretion to the utilities director that's currently in the condition not sufficient to address the concern that's being raised?
I think
there is already discretionary language for submetering.
Andy?
Yeah, so the discretion is just, to allow sub-metering versus okay, so the discretion is to allow this master meter and sub-metering, and I think
Correct.
that is an alternative to just a single meter for the whole property.
Isn't that what we're talking? I mean, I'm kind of where Christine is. I don't know what you guys are asking us for. And all I want to say is what we've already said. The reason you have individual meters is so that people know what they're using and they can adjust their usage accordingly. And other than that, we don't care. Whatever the language, whatever is required legally, it has to happen. But other than that, sub meters, master meters, we don't, it's like, geez, come on. Let's go.
I'm getting emails from
I'm sorry, but I'm really, I gotta be done.
Michael, can I hop in here? Can I just say, what are we trying to achieve?
I don't know.
Because we can write the language or give you a yes or no answer of whether the current language provides the objective that you're trying to achieve.
This is Rachel again. If possible, we would love to see a single meter for the people's self-help housing property. Only the affordable units would be affected if it is possible under current code for John's regular program of tracking water use for his residents. If we can give them 1 meter, save them the cost of additional meters and sub-meters, that would be great. If we can't do that under code, understandable.
So can we just add, I don't have the language in front of me again, but can we just add the, or as per utility director to that first sentence, the one that says that has to be sub-metered?
Well, we're being asked to whether we want to basically allow people to have unmetered, utilities usage. And I think aren't we? I mean, and the answer is no, we're not. We want people to, it doesn't have to be formal metered. It's going to the utilities department, but we want people to be able to say, how much electricity am I using? I think the confusion, Carlin, is that meter in a building industry means a utility meter. Otherwise, it's called a sub-meter. So I think I think you're right. We have the intent of metering, but I think the language here would dictate, Rachel is reading that it would dictate that you have to have each apartment have its own water meter, water bill, waste, you know what I mean? And that would be excessive and not typical for an apartment building. So,
and I think they're distinguishing between residential, potentially condominiumized residential, and the second sentence or the third sentence, the privately owned sub-meters may be provided for residential apartments. I think that's precisely the distinction the code language or the condition language is trying to make.
So
and
isn't it there already?
Acknowledge that it is within the discretion of the utilities director to allow those sub-meters where we're talking about apartment residential.
So I think Andy said that at the beginning, it's there already. What do you want different? This is really frustrating to me.
The applicant is requesting a single meter. So not to have the individual meters, but
with
to have
no privately owned sub-meters required.
Right. And a lot of incomings are suggesting to me that it is a code requirement. And so I just, I recommend we move forward with the language as is.
And that's acceptable to the applicants. Thank you.
Okay. So with that, I think we ended up with no changes. I think that we have a lot of leverage within the updated that attachment H with all the language about vertical and pedestrian, vertical mixed use and pedestrian And I appreciate, it sounds like that's the intent of the developer as well. So unless there's further discussion, I'm ready to go ahead and move the suite of staff recommendations.
I'll second.
Sorry, you're.
City Clerk?
Councilmember Pease,
Yes.
Councilmember Christensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Mayor Harmon.
Yes, and with that, it passes 4-0.
Thank you, everyone, for sticking with me. I know that this was kind of my rally call, and I really appreciate. I think this is important, long-lasting conversation that will make a difference in our built environment.
No, it's good that you asked your questions. Those were good questions, and when you're asking them at midnight, it's
Yeah, no,
it's
that
hard.
was.
It's harder
that was
apparently
not
for
good
me
for any
at
of
5
us.
o'clock in the afternoon. That's my slow time. Okay, good.
All right. Anything else then?
We're done.
Okay, all right.
you.
Well, Madam Mayor, before we do drop off, I just want to talk a little bit about the next council meeting and anything that we could do. We've got the placement and the swearing in scheduled for December 1st. We are on track. It appears that we will have certification of results, as I mentioned last night, for December 1st. We've got a relatively light agenda, but as we think about December 8th, if there's any feedback that the council has for me and in terms of process, we do have another long night that evening with closed session. It's about a little over 4 hours. So I know last night drew on a little longer because of the COVID report and the item coming off of consent, but just wanted to check in with council, and if there's suggestions that you want to provide offline, we're happy to get those so we can be as efficient as possible as we move forward.
Thank you for that, Derek. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. It's, your reports I think are really valuable. So, but yeah, great. Thank you for that opportunity.
And that's, sorry, it's 4 hours, but it starts at 5, correct?
We have not confirmed with the council. We are suggesting on December 8th. We've polled, I believe, Teresa, it shows in the notes that we've asked for a 4:30 start time. So we've estimated that we've got about 70 minutes of closed session items that night. So the regular portion of the meeting is about 3 hours, which, historically we've tried to shoot for 4 hours. I just don't think that that's actually humane to the council and the community and everyone else to do 4 hours on a Zoom call. So we're going to try to pare that down in the future and limit it down to 3 hours. But just wanted to give you advance notice that we will have a long time that day. And if there's things that you've observed last night or otherwise that we can be helpful to the council and the community, we're all ears.
Thank you. I mean, I think we handled a remarkable amount of very heavy work yesterday, and it took a long time, but we knew it would, and that's the way it goes. The big unknown for December 8th, of course, is our new council member who sometimes does like to ask a lot of questions, so encourage her to get those questions answered ahead of time. And then, so, yeah.
All right.
Alan, anything you can do on that front, we would all appreciate. Thank you for volunteering. We appreciate that.
I have zero influence on that one. So I got somebody even older and crotchetier than me. So don't even.
God.
I know. I know. I mean, I've been trying to explain about our
I assume we're
dream
still public. Are we
team.
still broadcasting?
We are.
Yeah, we're
On
still
top of that,
broadcasting.
let's
Okay.
we need to get planning commission started in 4 minutes. So
Oh,
just
yeah.
an FYI.
Okay.
Any feedback, I'm happy to take it offline. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.